Bitcoin was created in 2009, 14 years ago. The World Wide Web was created in 1989. Just 11 years after the web was invented, over 50% of people in Canada and Norway were online. And in 2005, over 1 billion people were online. Does that mean Bitcoin is lagging and we are not early in comparison to the web? So this is a brilliant question, and I have the answer for you. So first of all, let's go back in history to where we are. The internet was invented in the 1960s by the US Department of Defense and ARPA, which I think is Advanced Research Projects Agency. 1969 was when the first computer networks were connected, and the network was ARPANET, which was actually operational in 1971. What a great year. And ARPANET connected various computers together from different research institutions around the country, but mostly military based. And that is the map. They had really nice maps back then in the 60s. But let's go a little bit forward to the 70s. I'm sorry for this history lesson, but it's so important to get to the bottom of this. Throughout the 70s, up until 1983, internet was mainly used by early adopters. Remember those crazy cypherpunks like crypto, Bitcoin? These were research institutions, academic institutions, universities, government agencies, military. And a big part of this was because computers looked like this, everybody. They often took up the entire room and were extremely expensive pieces of equipment. Hence, for 14 years of the existence of the internet, it was only used by a handful of individuals, just like Bitcoin in the very early days. So let's go a little bit further. What drove the adoption? So ARPANET in 1983, I think, split into two separate networks. One was for military use, and the other one was the World Wide Web as we know it today. But even then, it took another 10 years before people could get their hands on it because they didn't have computers. So really, it didn't kick off till 1990, correctly, as you say. But most importantly, and you're dead right about the Canadians, big shout out to the Canadians, the British and the Norwegians out there. The Canadians were early adopters, the most early adopters of the internet way back when. And I know a lot of you out there are also early adopters of Bitcoin. So congratulations. But this is kind of the perspective I want you to all take away. It took a decade plus to get to 5% internet adoption. And it took 20 years to get to about 80%. But you got to remember, we're looking at the whole world and not just an isolated bunch of very advanced people like in Canada that jump on the latest thing way before anybody else. And that is the big message here. So if you look at South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, etc., it took a long time really for it to get kick-started. And that is the big message. And I'm going to show you one more little thing here, and then we do one final chart that will sum it all up. Bitcoin is still super early. It's being adopted, however, at a much faster rate than the internet. We just had the fastest adoption in Bitcoin over the past couple of weeks. And you know why? Because of the banking crisis. And if we map the timeline of Bitcoin directly to the timeline of the internet, we'd be roughly, and this depends on who you ask, I think we'd be about 1993, but I'll show you in my next chart. And for Bitcoin to get to the next level of mass adoption like the internet, we believe we need the three factors to play out over the next 10 years. It'll take us to 2032. One, we need general public access, just like the internet and computers way back when. And I do believe we'll have a catalyst. That catalyst will be central bank digital currencies. That will drive huge adoption. People now, thanks to all the events of 2020 and so on, do no longer trust mainstream media, governments to make decisions for them. They will want something to save their money, especially now with the money printing happening to bail out the banks. Second, the rise of major use cases of Bitcoin, like the internet, didn't really happen. Think Amazon.com, Yahoo back in the day, all those Lycos search engine and stuff. For those of you who are old enough to remember that, this will be the same thing. That'll happen with Bitcoin. We'll need things like DeFi, NFTs, merchant adoption, etc. And third, probably the most important, is continued improvement in the technology. Remember how clunky the internet was late 90s, early 2000s. It was horrific, but it has to get better. And that's why things like ordinals, layer 2s, and Bitcoin will evolve as a technology. But the most important chart, just to show you all, this is courtesy of Willy Woo, but I added a couple little things to it. First of all, if you go back to 1990, when the internet really kicked off, like Milo, like you correctly mentioned, it didn't really go anywhere for the first 10 years. Now, if we take that and scale it exactly to where we are with Bitcoin today, we're about 5 years in, because remember, for the first 5 to 8 years, nothing really happened on it. And to give you an example of how this is true, there are 44 million Bitcoin wallets today. 44 million, there's 8 billion people. So if you assume every wallet was one person, that would be 0.0055%, 0.0055 of the population. It's less than half of 1%. Now, considering many people have 5 to 10 wallets, you could easily take a fifth of that 44 million. You have about 10 million people, just less. And that's 0.0013 or 0.13% of the actual population have actually adopted Bitcoin. So ladies and gentlemen, if you are here and you own a little Bitcoin, you are super early, and congratulations. So, and especially with everything we've seen, it's insane what's going on in the world. And people are now wise to it thanks to things like YouTube and Twitter. You guys can all access the truth and not listen to mainstream media or read a newspaper that's writing articles like it's 1970s.